In the forgotten, humid corners of rural Georgia, where the kudzu vines crawl over everything and the air hangs thick with the ghosts of the past, there are stories. Stories whispered on front porches, stories that cling to the humid air like the smell of honeysuckle and decay. This is one of those stories. It's a story about a girl named Daisy, a story about a love that was born in the dirt and ended in blood. Daisy was a firefly of a girl, bright and beautiful, trapped in the dusty, God-fearing town of Redemption Creek. At 20, she was buzzing with a life her small world couldn't contain. She met a boy named Wade, 2 years older, with a lazy smile and a way with words that could charm a snake out of its skin. Theirs was a love affair of stolen moments in the back of his pickup truck, of urgent, fumbling explorations fueled by a curiosity that Daisy mistook for love. In the sweltering heat of a Georgia October in 1994, that curiosity led to a consequence. She was pregnant. Wade, with his easy promises, swore he would do the right thing, but it was Daisy's father, a hard, Bible-thumping man whose fear of God was matched only by his fear of town gossip, who sealed her fate. There would be no shame brought upon his house. There would be a wedding. A quick, quiet affair at the county courthouse. A shotgun wedding in everything but name. The wedding day was not the fantasy Daisy had dreamed of. There was no white dress, no flowers, no photos to capture a happiness she didn't feel. There was only the cold, sterile reality of a judge's chambers and the suffocating weight of a life she had not chosen. She had been taught by her mother that a young woman's romantic dreams were frivolous fantasies. But in the quiet, desperate nights that followed, Daisy realized her dreams were not fantasies. They were a genuine, aching hunger for a life of love and passion. A life that her new husband, Wade, had no intention of giving her. Once the shotgun was holstered, his charming words dried up, replaced by a sullen indifference. For nearly 3 years, Daisy withered in the silent, suffocating prison of her marriage. Finally, she gathered the courage to ask for a divorce. The request was met with a slap across the face from her father and the threat of disownment. A wife asking for a divorce, he roared, was an abomination, an absurdity against God and nature. Trapped, suffocated, and utterly alone, Daisy found solace in the arms of another man. His name was Silas. He was 9 years older, a quiet, thoughtful man who ran the local hardware store. He was everything Wade was not. He was mature, he was kind, he listened. Wade was often away for weeks at a time, working on construction crews in other states. In those long, lonely stretches, Daisy and Silas's friendship deepened into something more. An illicit, passionate affair that became the only source of light in her dark, narrow world. On the 28th of May, 1998, Wade came home early. He found them together in his own bed. The scene that followed was a blur of rage and violence. Wade, his face a mask of fury, launched himself at Silas. But Daisy, in a surge of protective instinct, threw herself between them, giving her lover just enough time to escape through a back window. In the aftermath, Daisy pleaded for forgiveness. Wade, for the sake of their young son, agreed to overlook her betrayal. But his forgiveness was a poison. The humiliation of being cuckolded, the whispers and snickers of the town, twisted him into a man she no longer recognized. He became cold, suspicious, his eyes constantly following her, his mind a breeding ground for paranoia. Her prison had just gotten smaller, its walls closing in on her. Feeling the suffocating weight of Wade's control, her love for Silas growing with every passing day, Daisy again asked for a divorce. This time, Wade's response was not indifference. It was a cold, hard refusal. His male pride, or perhaps some twisted, lingering feeling of ownership, would not allow it. On the 23rd of July, 2000, things came to a head. Wade had followed her. He caught her leaving Silas's house in the grey light of dawn. The quiet, desperate hope in his eyes shattered, replaced by a chilling, dead calm. When they got home, Daisy, tired of the lies, tired of the cage, admitted everything. She told him she loved Silas. She told him their marriage was over. Wade's reaction was terrifying. He didn't shout. He didn't hit her. He walked calmly to the kitchen, came back with a large butcher knife and laid it on the table between them. "If I ever see you with him again," he said, his voice a low, flat monotone, "I will kill him. I will gut him like a deer and leave him in the woods for the buzzards." The next day, A terrified Daisy recounted the threat to Silas. He listened, his face grim. Then he offered a solution, a suggestion so shocking it took her breath away. "We have to act first," he said, his voice calm, reasonable. "We have to eliminate the problem before it eliminates me." Daisy was horrified. But Silas was persuasive. He spoke of a future together, a life free from the threat of her violent, unstable husband. He painted a picture of a life she so desperately wanted. When she hesitated, he pressed her, his voice a soft, seductive poison. "This is the only way we can be together, Daisy," he whispered. "Don't you want to live with me? Truly live?" His words, which she mistook for a declaration of a love so powerful it would risk anything, were a masterful act of manipulation. She agreed. He gave her a small vial of sleeping pills. On the night of May 29th, 2000, Daisy made Wade his favorite meal, a thick, rich chicken stew. She secretly crushed the sleeping pills and mixed them into his bowl. She watched as he ate, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. He grew drowsy, his head slumping forward onto the table. He was in a deep, unconscious sleep. She went to the back door and gave a signal. A few moments later, Silas slipped into the house. He moved to the sleeping form of her husband, his face a mask of cold determination. He took the butcher knife from the kitchen block and placed it in Daisy's trembling hand. "This is your hellish life, Daisy," he urged, his voice a low, insistent whisper. "You have to be the one to end it." Terror seized her. She couldn't do it. She shook her head, her hand refusing to obey. "This is your nightmare," Silas hissed, his grip tightening on her arm. "If you can't do this, this nightmare will haunt you forever, and we can never be together." Daisy looked at her sleeping husband, at the knife in her hand, at the man she loved standing beside her, and she knew there was no turning back. She raised the knife, and she plunged it into her husband's chest. Twice. Together, they wrapped Wade's body in a tarp. In the dead of night, they carried him to a small, deserted alley behind their house and buried him in a shallow, unmarked grave. Daisy later took the murder weapon and buried it under an old oak tree in her backyard, too afraid to throw it in the river, too afraid it would be found. For 2 years, the secret lay buried in the Georgia clay. Daisy and Silas continued their affair, now open, brazen. Daisy told everyone that Wade had simply left, that he had run off to find work in another state. No one questioned it. It was what men like Wade did. But Wade's mother, a quiet, observant woman, grew uneasy. Her son had not called, not once, in 2 years. Daisy's blatant affair with Silas, her complete lack of concern for her missing husband, felt wrong. In early 2002, she went to the police. The investigation was slow at first, but the inconsistencies began to pile up. There were no records of Wade leaving the state, no financial transactions, no credit card use, nothing after May 29th, 2000. A neighbor remembered hearing strange noises from the house on the night he disappeared, the sound of something heavy being dragged, the sound of metal on stone. A search of Daisy's home revealed a blood-stained mat under the living room rug. A prescription for powerful sleeping pills was found in her medicine cabinet. DNA tests confirmed the blood on the mat belonged to Wade. Fingerprints on the prescription bottle belonged to Daisy and to Silas. The pharmacist confirmed that Silas had purchased the pills. Confronted with the irrefutable evidence, Daisy confessed. She told them everything. How she had stabbed her husband, how Silas had given her the pills and helped her bury the body. She led them to the old oak tree in her backyard. They dug up the knife. Wade's DNA was still on the blade, but Silas was gone. Alerted to the investigation, he had fled. He changed his phone number, vanished. A nationwide manhunt was launched. 2 months later, after his photo was circulated on the national news, he was located and arrested in a small town in Colorado. During his interrogation, Silas initially denied everything. He admitted to the affair, but he tried to put all the blame for the murder on Daisy. But when confronted with the evidence linking him to the crime and with the sordid details of his own past, he finally confessed to being an accomplice. And then, the final, shocking truth came out. The investigation revealed that Silas was not the simple hardware store owner he appeared to be. He was a professional con artist. For years, he had been moving from small town to small town, using false identities to charm and scam wealthy young women out of their money. He had a string of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in his wake. But his motive for targeting Daisy, for orchestrating the murder of her husband, was not money. It was revenge. 10 years earlier, his younger sister had been killed in a hit-and-run accident. He had been a small-time pickpocket back then, unable to afford her medical care. The driver had never been found. The police had dismissed the case, another unsolved tragedy. Silas had vowed to find the man responsible. After years of searching, he had discovered that the driver was Wade. Wade, who had gone on to live a happy, unrepentant life while Silas's sister was in her grave. The discovery had ignited a burning, all-consuming hatred in Silas. He had deliberately moved to Redemption Creek. He had deliberately seduced Daisy. He had manipulated her, played on her unhappiness, and used her as the weapon to exact his long-awaited bloody revenge. On May 15, 2002, both Daisy and Silas stood in court and pleaded guilty. On July 28th, Silas, the con artist, the manipulator, the architect of a decade-long revenge plot, was sentenced to death. Daisy, the abused wife who had become a murderer, received a death sentence with a 2-year reprieve. In prison, Daisy was consumed by a guilt that was a far more terrible prison than the one with steel bars. She was haunted by the ghost of her dead husband, his face a constant silent accusation in her dreams. For 10 long years, her family, shamed and broken, did not visit her. She was utterly alone. But in that solitude, something began to change. She showed remorse. She participated in prison programs. She became a model inmate. In 2011, after 10 years of silence, the prison officials arranged a reconciliation. They showed Wade's parents a video of Daisy, her face etched with a decade of grief and regret, tearfully apologizing for what she had done. Despite their enduring hatred, despite the gaping wound of their loss, they were moved. They saw not a monster, but a broken woman. They saw the mother of their grandchild. They agreed to bring their granddaughter, now a young teenager who had grown up without a mother or a father, to visit her in prison. The reunion was a heart-wrenching scene of fragmented sentences, of tears and apologies, of a pain so deep it could never be fully healed. The granddaughter, with the simple, piercing innocence of a child, asked her mother why she had been gone for so long. It was a question for which there was no easy answer, a question that broke Daisy's heart all over again. Full forgiveness was impossible. The past could not be undone. But in that small, sterile prison visiting room, a flicker of something like grace appeared. A chance for a mother to connect with her child. A chance for a woman to begin the long, slow, impossible work of atoning for her sins. The story of Daisy and Wade and Silas became another one of those tales whispered on the front porches of Redemption Creek. A painful, cautionary lesson about the devastating consequences of misguided love, of betrayal, and of a revenge that had consumed everyone it touched. It was a story that proved that while the past can never be buried, there is always, even in the darkest of places, the slimmest, most fragile hope for redemption. A chance not to erase the mistakes of the past, but to try in some small way to make amends for them in the future.